connection, community, sisterhood, feminine power, the rebel woman, candid and meaningful conversations about health and tapping into your intuitive self. This is the Rebel Talk Podcast with Dr. Michelle Peris.
This episode is brought to you by the Poppy Clinic. The Poppy Clinic is your naturopathic and functional medicine clinic. We are located in Oakville, Ontario, and we serve the Ontario community. We can provide visits either in office or virtually. We help serve women and their families in the pursuit to optimal health. We believe in individualized care through proper assessment, testing, and personalized treatment plans in order to help you take your power back. We love to educate our patients so that they understand what it is that is going on with their body, how it speaks to them, and what action steps to take in order to transform their health. We offer 15-minute complimentary appointments where you can meet with one of our naturopathic doctors to discuss your individual health concern and determine how we can help you. Please check us out at poppyclinic.com or over on Instagram at The Poppy Clinic. We cannot wait to help you thrive in your health, gain clarity, and be empowered in this healthcare process. We look forward to meeting you.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Rebel Talk podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Peris. I'm a naturopathic doctor, the director over at the Poppy Clinic, and the creator of the incredible women's health initiative, the Wild Collective. I'm so excited about this week's episode. Sometimes there's like these surprise guests put into my schedule in the podcast, and I'm not quite sure how they got there. And the cool thing is nothing ever happens by accident. And today's conversation is evidence of that. Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers is a Harvard-trained epidemiologist. And as a researcher, she studied health issues. And after spending 15 years in the Western healthcare system, she became disappointed with how often it fails her patients. So now she works in a private practice with individuals one-on-one who are tired of being told they can only manage their symptoms, and gets them on a customized plan to finally reclaim their health and heal. Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers is an absolute delight. I loved this conversation, and it's so cool to me that these things just fall into my schedule, and then I end up making a best friend out of it. So we really had a very meaningful conversation about what health is and how we must not only address the physical symptoms and presentation of ill health or disease, but we must also address the non-physical, the energetic, the spiritual, the mindset perspective that drive behavior, because behavior is often what's behind our decision-making. It's behind our ability to execute on a healthcare plan. It's our ability to actually maintain health once we've reclaimed it or achieved it. She worked in chronic health, so she has such a depth of wisdom with how much our identity with, our disease or diagnosis or our relationship to pain can actually impact how we are able to get ourselves to higher states of health. I loved this conversation. I'm super grateful to have connected with Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers, and I know you're going to love this conversation. So buckle up, enjoy, and without further ado, I welcome my new friend to the podcast, Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers. Well, Dr. Elizabeth Rodgers, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here with you today.
We got to chat just a few minutes before we hit record. And the thing that's very evident to me is your heart and your passion.
Thank you.
For the work that you do. As a Harvard-trained epidemiologist, please tell my audience how you came to the place where you are today in terms of how you're impacting health.
Yeah. Well, it's a far stretch from where I started, to say the least. But, to make what could be a very long story short, and we could easily just talk about my story, for an hour. I'm a Harvard trained epidemiologist, like you shared with our listeners. And, as a researcher, I really just studied the causes of health issues to keep it, very simple. Even in a worldwide pandemic, and we hear more of the word epidemiologist, it still is confusing to people. But what we really do is study cause and effect as it relates to health. And I'm an expert in chronic health issues and chronic illness. And I studied the causes of health issues. And after I spent 15 years inside the Western healthcare system, I became really disappointed in how often it fails patients. And along my very traditional path of training, I suffered my own near-death experience where a surgeon left me bleeding internally and never told me about it. And after that fight for my life, which I should not have even survived, I was literally that 1 in a million chance. I knew that I was here to do something different. And then I went on my own decade-long battle with chronic physical, mental, and emotional health issues. And I bounced from doctor to doctor, searching for someone to help me. All I wanted was to heal and be healthy. And all I got were constant offers of ways to manage my symptoms and my pain. And nobody would talk to me about the root causes of my health issues. I feel like I still hear that phrase, you're just going to have to manage it, over and over again in my mind. And I got to the point where I heard that one too many times, and I just had to do something different. So now I have a private practice where I work one-on-one with clients who are tired of being told they can only manage symptoms, and I help them get on a customized plan to finally heal. And like we were talking about before we started, I really believe that health, healing, the journey to find optimal health and well-being, if you're somebody out there that is searching for that, like I'm sure so many of our listeners are, it's not just about what you're doing, right? It's not just about the physical side of our health and well-being. There's an equation involved in our healing, and there's this energetic, and some people might want to call it spiritual, but I often call it just the non-physical or energetic part of our health and well-being. And I think it's really time that practitioners start to bridge the gap between those two sides of the equation. But in our Western system, we're very, very focused on the doing and the managing, but not necessarily diving any deeper than that below the surface, and also not connecting the dots to the other pieces of our health and well-being. And it's honestly just simple physics and science that everything is energy. And the fact that we don't talk about that at all, I've never heard any doctor or specialist talk about that ever. I think that think that it is time. I really, really think that it is time. So I got myself trained as a medical intuitive and a Reiki practitioner, and trained in holistic nutrition and healing. And I started to just bring all of those skills together because I really think that that's what people are looking for. We don't all just want to know what to do or what to eat or what not to eat. Some of us also want to be able to sustain the healthy changes that we make so that we can stay healthy and so that we can navigate setbacks, which we all inevitably will have, with confidence.
Yeah, you're speaking right to my heart. I came to the same conclusion, even in naturopathic medicine, which I love, but practicing in a model that was still following or trying to align itself with a model that I think is fundamentally broken. I was running into the same sort of frustrations you were, which is we're not addressing a huge part of the pie here. Yeah. And it was becoming increasingly more frustrating for me to even work in that model, in that capacity, because I just didn't feel like I had the time to unpack really the obstacles to cure, as we call, or the things that are really driving motivations and behaviors, and the reason why we can't get people out of their chronic pain, right?
Yes.
I
you're speaking straight to my heart too. I was going to say we were meant to be friends. I need you in my life. Yeah. Exactly, right? And you're just hitting on basic psychology too, which is that our identity is what drives our behaviors and our actions. And so I used to work, you'll appreciate this, back when I was doing research, I used to work for a period of time. I worked in diabetes, weight loss. And, as we all know, we have a population that is getting increasingly sick, and we are getting, struggling with, adult obesity and things like that. And so I was really passionate about type 2 diabetes for a while because, and I still am passionate about it all, but that is a condition that we call in Western medicine a lifestyle condition. So I worked on this study that started out, it's called the DLP, the Diabetes Lifestyle Program. And this study was one of the studies that fundamentally changed me in my life. So this study, and if for those of us who are non-science experts, when you do a research study, you have to report analyses and outcomes throughout the course of the study to whoever your funding agency is. And one of the primary reasons that you're doing that is so that whoever is funding you and the powers that be are making sure that your research, of course, is ethical, is sound, is that there's nothing unfair going on in your research, that everybody should be disclosed to understand. So during the course of this study, the study was actually being conducted to compare a new pharmaceutical with the current pharmaceutical that was being used. So big surprise. But where I was passionate and where I was involved in the study was in the control group. And the control group was looking at a lifestyle change. So can we just do something at all by helping people be healthier with just their lifestyle without taking a medication? So the hypothesis of this study had nothing to do with the lifestyle change. It was all about proving that this one drug was better than another. And I personally am not very passionate about the pharmaceutical side of things. So I was all about the lifestyle change. But what was really awesome is that the National Institutes of Health actually had to shut down the study temporarily, because when we were reporting results of the study, it actually turned out that the lifestyle program was outperforming both drugs in the study. And so it was considered unethical to not allow everybody participating in the study to be able to adopt the lifestyle change if that was something they were interested in. I remember when this happened thinking like, this is going to change everything. Like, this is going to change the world. This is going to change science and research forever. And unfortunately, it didn't. But what did come out of that is that I realized that the power we all have to heal. But the outcome of that study was that the problem with the lifestyle change was maintenance. So people were able to make a change for a period of time. Some of them were followed years into the future. And we saw that even 3 years out, 1 year out, 3 years out, some people were maintaining those positive changes, and the ones that were actually still doing better than the people that were taking the drugs. But so much of them were falling off the bandwagon. And so these research studies are always concluding in weight loss, in lifestyle change, and behavior change, that we need to figure out how to help people maintain the behavior change. How do we maintain this change? So that was where I started wanting to learn more and study more. And then it really brought me back to what we're talking about, like basic psychology, right? It's our identity is what drives our behaviors and our actions. So I realized, well, okay, so if we're telling people what to do, that's really, really important, right? But who's the person that's doing all the doing?
Right.
Because the person who's doing all the doing is probably the person that got themselves into a situation they didn't want to be in, where they were stuck in less than optimal health. And ultimately, that we have to really talk about and explore with people if we want to help them make a change that will actually last.
Yeah. That kind of research gives me whole body goosebumps.
Me
And
too.
I just want to say, please never change, because we need dreamers and enthusiastic souls like yourself to bring that information forward, and never stop believing in the propensity of that, because you do think, oh my gosh, this will change medicine forever. Everyone
I did.
so
I was sure of it. It was like 20 years ago, and I was like, this is it. Like, it's happening, and I'm a part of it.
It's so delightful. And then you're hitting the nail on the head. It's the maintenance part that seems to be so particularly challenging for people, right? You
Yeah.
can do something for a period of time, but if we don't talk about the fundamental or other pieces that drive behavior and behavioral change long-standing, then we're going to probably miss it, right? Because then
Yeah.
people just go back into their patterns. What I think is super cool of the work that you do and who you serve is like chronic health patients are a particularly fascinating area because there's so much at play there. So
So
let's
much.
let's talk about how you really started to address this maintenance change long term. Like what for you, especially with that patient demographic that can be very stuck in their thinking, very identified with their pathology, their diagnosis,
Yeah,
it becomes part of their identity.
absolutely.
How do
I
you
identified with my diagnoses.
mm,
Yeah,
hard not to when you're being told that's what you have and we collapse, that's what you are.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So bring us to your journey and like really helping understand the evolution into, it's super cool. Like now you have this medical intuitive piece, this holistic nutrition, Reiki. There's a huge part of what you do is energetic and
Yeah.
spiritual or non-physical, as you say. Tell us help us understand how now you view health, how you're addressing chronic disease, and what avenues you're exploring with the individuals you serve to help them have long-standing change.
I love that question. And when we were talking before we started recording today, we were talking about my journey, and I was my own first client. I was everything that we're talking about. I had so many different chronic physical, mental, and emotional issues going on all at the same time. All that I was hearing from every practitioner around me. And I, at that point, had left the mainstream system and I was working with naturopaths, Ayurvedic practitioners, anybody I could learn from that was looking at things from a different perspective. I was all in on that. And what I felt like I kept getting were like pieces of the puzzle and pieces of the puzzle. So what I had to do was start from the inside out. I kept hitting wall after wall after wall because on my own journey, what I would do is I would start doing, right, all the things that the practitioners were telling me to do. And I would make some progress for a while. And then inevitably, I'd do what I felt like was hitting a wall. And I think, okay, now I'm stuck again. So something else is missing. And I realized that it had so much to do not just with who I was being internally, but also with so many other external factors that impact our health and ability to heal, which I know you understand deeply, right? Like our relationships. There was a point when I was trapped in an emotionally abusive relationship, and I realized that inside of a relationship like that, I was never going to find optimal health and well-being because social support is extremely important. And I actually studied this and talked about it deeply as part of my doctoral dissertation because I know that it matters. And I actually did some studies inside of my dissertation work that showed that the type of support we have can not just help us heal, but it can also stop us from healing too and stop us from making progress. And so having the ability to rely on positive support means everything. So what I do now in my practice is kind of the way that is not just kind of, it is the way that I approached myself initially, which is first, of course, it's important that we know the root causes of your health issues, right? Because you need to know precisely how to heal them and avoid them. But like we both know, there aren't just physical root causes of our health issues like toxins and pathogens. There are non-physical causes as well. And it's also important that we be able to take our power back so we can feel confident and in control. And part of that has to do with who we're being, right? So how I help people is I really feel that I help people transform mind, body, and spirit because transformation has to happen from the inside out. So first we identify root causes, both physical and non-physical. Then we create a roadmap to heal. right? Because we both know it doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately. It doesn't necessarily happen fast either.
That's
But
like a pill
no,
one.
I know and that's so hard. I think that's what's hard for a lot of people who have been part of the more mainstream system for so long is we're used to being given something that while it's a surface level solution, it is helping us manage our pain and symptoms to some degree. So it is giving us some sort of relief. And then when we have to start doing it on our own, and things just don't happen quickly like that in an hour, right? Usually you take a pill and within a half hour you're feeling some sort of relief, however temporary that is. But that pill is absolutely not on any level targeting the root causes of your health issues. So it's really important that you know what they are, but both understanding the physical and the non-physical, and then knowing precisely how to heal those toxins and pathogens, right? Because we're all, in a way, standing in our own way. But then there's all these other factors, right, that impact our health and ability to heal. So there's our stress, and that is also a big one, something I studied very deeply for a long period of time along my journey. Stress impacts our health and ability to heal. If you look up, we all know we can find studies that conflict each other, but there is a lot of research that suggests that, a large majority of our health issues are created in part by stress. And I always say in part because there's never just one root cause of our health issues, right? There's going to be toxins and pathogens at play. If you're somebody who has never been taught to manage your stress and you are completely consumed with it, then unfortunately you've got some adrenal glands that are being overworked. And so there's some issues there going on as nervous system regulation and nurturing those adrenal glands. So if stress is a factor in your life, which I feel like it just is for everybody to some degree, then we have to address that too. But then, what's going on with your stress though? Like, why are you even having it? Because we both know that a lot of that is unfortunately self-induced. So what is the way that you talk to yourself? What kind of stories do you have about your own ability to heal? Do you believe that you can heal? Or are you, like you said, stuck in the identity of somebody who has X, Y, or Z conditions? Because I was trapped in that mode for a long time. I identified as somebody that had IBS. I identified as somebody that had chronic anxiety and depression. I don't have any of those things anymore. And I'm not somebody that has those diagnoses. I identify as somebody who's healthy and optimally well, but it's a transition to get there, right? And like we were talking about before we started recording, our identity is what drives our behaviors and our actions. So, of course, we all have stories we tell ourselves. We all have habits that are ingrained in us. We all have behaviors. So, of those, though, which ones are limiting you, right? Because all beliefs are limiting, right? Because they help us create who we are, but not all of them are limiting in a negative way. So of all those things, what stories do we have? What beliefs do we have? What habits do we have that don't serve our optimal health and well-being and in fact might stand in our way? And then you have to take a step even further beyond that, because it's not just, we hear a lot, I think, in the world now about mindset change. If you're someone that listens to anything like this podcast or anything in the holistic healing realm, or even if you just look on social media, you see a lot of practitioners or health coaches talking about like, you have to have a positive mindset. You have to train your mindset. You have to train your mindset. Well, that's really important. But, repeating a positive affirmation is only going to get you so far. So what's going on though behind the affirmation? And it's really about training our brain, right? Because we have a reptilian part of our brain, which is the oldest part of our brain, that is all about survival. And so any habits that we have, even just the way we talk to ourselves, or even just if you have, just your habit of getting up and having a cup of coffee every morning, or if you're like us, if you have snacks at night and you have this habit of having, an unhealthy snack every night, that part of our brain doesn't identify those things as good or bad. It just identifies those things as necessary for your survival. So it's, so you're not, so if you're trapped, that's part of why a lot of people get trapped, because our prefrontal cortex, right, the thinking part of our brain knows and understands, yes, this habit is not healthy for me. Eating this giant bag of Cheetos every night is not healthy for me. But because you've done it every night for 10 years, your reptilian part of your brain is like, no, you need these Cheetos to survive. So those two parts of our brain, get into this battle. And then our, limbic system, or the mammalian part of our brain, which is the emotional part of our brain, gets stuck in the middle, and we have this battle going on. So we also have to train people to train their brain, because you're making me think of this quote that first you create your habits, and then your habits create you, right? So we have to actually go back to training our brain, because if you want to be a person that just gets up and always has a positive mindset, or always just naturally makes the best decisions for their health and well-being, you have to train yourself to become that person, right? And that means making a choice to do that and take those steps. So I also help people train themselves to transform, because of course any one of us could say, I want to transform to be X, Y, and Z, and you have this vision in your head of the person that you'd like to become. But it's not a matter of just getting up in the morning one day and deciding today is the day, I'm gonna be her, that's who I'm gonna be today, and this is it, everything's gonna change forever. It's like anything else. It takes time and it takes work. And I think that's really important, because we also don't have a system where we really give people that kind of ongoing support so they can train themselves, right? And at least in a Western healthcare system, you get to see somebody, they give you 5, to 10 minutes of their time maximum, and then that's it. You're on your own for an extended period of time until you can see them again. And the next time you see them, you're not going to get an opportunity to say like, hey, you told me to do X, Y, and Z, you told me to eat these things and take these supplements. And, I'm doing it sometimes, but not all the time. And, and last week I had a, really bad fight with my boyfriend, and I just totally fell off the bandwagon, and I don't know, and now what do I do? And so we change every moment of every day. So having somebody to help you strategize and meet you in the place you're in so you can adapt and keep going and making progress is really important. So I also work with people to do exactly that.
Yeah, I love that. I think, the first thing I think that you said that was so important that I'd like to reframe is like, not reframe, but emphasize.
Yeah.
Is we need to expand our container, expand our curiosity of what health and healing looks like. And we need to make room for the possibility as a population as a whole, that there are other ways in which we can get healthy. Like there, it actually ought to be essential, because what made me laugh, a few things that your dissertation was on community. I was like, man, we really were meant to be friends. That's what my dissertation would have been too.
I love you.
But a good friend of mine calls it good luck medicine, right? Like, there's 5 minutes. Here's the recommendation.
I love that.
Good luck with that. We send them back to the exact same environment. And then we expect this person who's stuck in their pattern of thinking, that's habituated in their nutrition plan, that is fearful of change, that's, relationships are not hospitable to shift and transformation. It's like, oh, it didn't work 6 weeks later. Like it was so frustrating, even in my world, even though the information we give is so solid, it still was not addressing a huge part of the puzzle, which was, well, of course that didn't work. You met the electric fence and you wanted to go gluten-free, and your husband said, how dare you change our bread? It tastes like crap. And all of these, and you're like, okay, we'll just go back, because my bloating isn't that bad. It's just like, I'm being very overly reductionistic, but on purpose, because we can't be surprised that people aren't getting the results. And then on the piece of affirmation, like I've read some of the literature on it, and it's like, if the affirmations you're repeating don't align with your belief system, it does nothing.
Exactly.
So therefore, you need to work with someone who's going to help you lock in affirmations that align with what you actually believe to be true about health or yourself, right? Like you just can't, that's why Google is great and problematic. Instagram is great and problematic because you can go
Yes.
read a meme and you're like, yeah, totally.
Yes. And you're like, that's going to be my mantra. I'm going to put this on the background of my phone. I'm going to read
You
it every
yourself,
day. Yeah.
you yourself don't believe it. It doesn't matter how many times you read it.
Yeah.
It really isn't going to shift the way you start to step into your day or how you lead your life. And I think that's deserves acknowledgement. And the one thing you said early on that I just want to highlight, especially with the work that you do, is like, it's so interesting too. And this work has definitely evolved how I even think things and how I articulate a lot of this to our community is like, even we have an ache, a pain, a way our body, like a symptom, and we have been taught to fear it. So of course we want to suppress it because
Yep.
that's what we've been taught is the right way to approach it. And yet when we start to reframe this concept of pain, which I imagine in your world is so important, is like, how do we reframe that for people to actually see that it's your body's way? We have to create room. We have to make it safe versus unsafe to experience bigger emotions, to experience physical pain, and start to see that it's actually your body's innate wisdom and intuition trying to tell you something is out of balance and it's just talking to you. Yet we're like, I have a headache,
Make it go
must
away.
suppress, right? So
Yep.
I'm just gonna let you
Oh my gosh, you're just
go.
so much, you're speaking just straight to my heart and soul. And I'm just really grateful for this connection
We're just
because
recording this podcast for
I
you.
know, I was just gonna say, I feel like I've just found a soul sister,
Yeah.
really, truly. You're just hitting the nail on the head in so many different ways. And one of the things you're making me think of is that you said, trusting your intuition. And I can't tell you how many women in my practice, past and present, that came to me. I'm thinking of one in particular, and I want to tell her story. And I think this is so important because I think what you and I are also getting at is that it's not just about us being, as a population, being open to the fact that there is something deeper and there are these other pathways through which we can achieve our goals around health and well-being. And everybody's goals look different because we're all different. But I feel too that by allowing ourselves to be dependent on just hurrying up and suppressing something, it's almost like we're putting a barrier between us and ourselves, right? Like our bodies is our partner. And when there's pain or when there's a symptom or whatever's going on, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional or otherwise, it's our body's way of communicating to us and telling us something, but we really cut off that communication in so many different ways and go into fear, and I'm thinking of a client of mine, a former client, a beloved client, who came to me and she had been put on an antidepressant postpartum, and it was literally 35 years later, and no doctor
Mhm.
had ever talked to her about coming off of that medication. So she had built up this fear that she was never going to be able to be healthy and well without it. But she wanted to be off of it so badly because, of course, as we all know, a prescription medication comes with a lot of caveats. And she recognized that it was no longer making her feel like herself. And she came to me, and I'll never forget our consultation. She came to me in tears and just the heart-wrenching stories, that people tell me about how they feel trapped, about how they have anxiety even about going to a practitioner because they're so scared of just being told you can never come off of this. You have to stay on this for the rest of your life. And of course, she had heard all of those stories, and now they were ingrained in her and her belief system about herself. And she just asked me, like, can I ever look and feel my best? Can I ever just feel good again? Is that even possible for me? And the fact that there are so many people running around doubting that they can ever have that just is breaks my heart into so many different pieces, and it's not okay. Because let's face it, there also are, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are some chronic health issues that people are born with, that they are going to live with for the duration of their lifetime. And so, I'm certainly not sitting here saying that anybody could just magically get up and out of that situation, but there are still ways to create what that person's version of optimal health and well-being is. So she and I worked together, and over time, we helped her safely come off of those prescription medications. And the thing is that what was standing in her way had nothing to do with any physical toxins or pathogens. It was all energetic. It was all like, it was as if she was detached from her intuition. She had this negative, unwanted energy that had been growing and growing and growing and following her around for decades at this point. And it really truly was a matter of us getting rid of that energy so that she could finally connect with herself for the first time in over 30 years. And she doesn't take that medication anymore, and she never had to look back. But what I had to watch her go through to be able to realize that she could trust herself, she could trust her body, she could connect to her intuition was, it was a challenge to help her take one step at a time to get there. So I feel like part of this journey, for people that really want optimal health and well-being is to be able to come back to finding ourselves again, to develop our intuition if we haven't, if it's underdeveloped, because we all have it, right? Everybody in the world has that gut feeling once in a while, right? Like that feeling you just know when something doesn't feel right. We all have it, but I feel like it's almost dormant in a way in so many of us. And so it's a matter of really developing that intuition again, learning how to trust it, and then learning how to take the signals and cues your body's sending you. Because this client I'm thinking of, once she was off of that medication, there would be days, like I can remember her going on vacation at one point and coming back and saying to me, like, wow, I see how different putting things in my body that are healthy for me versus not healthy for me makes me feel. But she would never had the opportunity to have that experience because the medication just masked her ability to have those connections and realize, she could build this relationship with herself. And I think that is such like a missing piece, in our health and healing world, is that like our ability to be with ourselves and, like you said, like be able to feel the feelings, right? So often people will feel like, what's the first thing we do when we feel something we don't want to feel? Like, okay, that like I'm anxious, like, I'm gonna have a drink, or I'm gonna do whatever I do to ease that feeling, rather than actually just sitting with it and asking ourselves, like, what's going on here, and allowing ourselves to move through that stuff and let it transform and shift.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's so like beautifully important. And it just, I know similar stories to your client who had been medicated for that long. It's like, just such a disempowered place of health, right? Someone recently had shared with me that, they didn't even know they could ask for certain labs. They were like, who am I to not trust? Like we have it all backwards. And so
Yep.
the more we inch towards helping individuals, reclaim that power for themselves and start to hold space and realize that they get to co-create health with the practitioners.
You just said like
Least
my
of all you
favorite
can say
word.
is
Yes.
co-create.
Yes.
It's just so vitally important, and myself included, it literally just drove me to a point where it was like, I can't participate in this system because it's no longer aligning for me. And when I started to step into new ways of helping people, for me, it was group health and in women's circles, and started seeing like, oh my gosh, do people know how powerful this is? Like, I've been talking to some of these women in my one-on-one practice for years, and now all of a sudden it's like they're unrecognizable, right? So it was like,
Yeah.
I couldn't unsee that. And then I actually started to see the real limitations to somebody's ability to maintain lasting change. Like you said, even compliance with supplements, it's a thing, but what is the underlying, like, why is it so hard?
Yeah.
And we're not asking that question. And even in
No.
a 30-minute appointment, you're unlikely to get to the root of that.
Exactly. You
So when we start
absolutely
to
are.
expand our level of thinking of what health looks like, that it's a journey, that there might be various ways in which we consume that, or participate in that healthcare healing journey or experience, it starts to get really rich and delicious. And, something I think you said that I also just want to highlight is, those individuals who are born, and there are certain chronicities to how they come to this world that they're always going to carry. So how do we help them live in alignment, and even like helping them see that there's somehow a gift in that? Like,
Yeah.
it's your journey to share. Like, think about what a blessing it is, that blessing, if you will, that you had the situation you were in, but clearly it was your mission to really pivot and then bring this message forward and help more people, because it literally gets you out of bed every day. Like, if one more person knows this, if I save one more person from, believing certain things about the system, then my job is done. It's like, how do we also reframe and start to see our potential challenges or potential failures, and we reframe that as our superpowers, the gifts at which we contribute, then life gets much more meaningful and beautiful. And I just get super excited about that.
Oh my gosh, you're bringing tears to my eyes because I just adore you and I feel 100% the same way. And you're making me think of a quote I heard just yesterday that everything that happens to us, whether the perception of it is positive or negative, is a blessing. And you're so right. I think that's something that I even overcame on my own healing journey, is this realization that, I think there's a lot of it can be easy to believe that, I'm going to do this for this period. Just tell me what I need to do now for a while. And then when I get to, looking and feeling my best again, or for the first time, then I'll just, then I will have achieved, I will have reached the goal and I can stop. But there's no such thing. It's not a destination. Like you said, it is absolutely a journey. And even when you move to a point in your journey that you're not necessarily experiencing symptoms or pain, it's still a constant day-to-day co-creative process. It is a constant day-to-day way of being. And so I think I feel like for us too, as practitioners and helpers and healers, I feel like it's part of our job too to help people realize, number one, just how powerful every single person is. I mean, I think if any one of us really had any idea just how powerful we are, we would pretty easily change. I think we are so detached from that power. And to realize that it is a journey. It's not a destination. There is no such thing as perfect. It will ebb and flow. It's not going to look like this nice cruise up the hill of a roller coaster and then you reach the place that you want to reach. It's a way of being and a way of living. And honestly, isn't that what life's all about, is to figure out who we are? And each of us came here with a totally different journey to learn a totally different set of lessons. And of course, we can't expect it to look like anybody else's. So trying to jam ourselves into doctors' offices or practices where we're being given the same kind of solutions to solve the same kinds of problems, just because I have the same problems as you does not mean that you and I both need the same approach. I think that there is no health benefit. If we could do a research study, I'm 100% confident we would find there is no health benefit or no benefit to us at all to trying to jam ourselves into those places that aren't going to get us where we want to go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Two kind of, well, okay, maybe three questions.
Yeah.
other than what you've already shared, because I
Yeah.
take a stab at what you would probably naturally say, but is there a perceived failure or challenge in your life that upon reflection, you're incredibly grateful that it happened?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And this is actually putting me into a very vulnerable place because I have never, ever, ever shared this publicly, and I even just got to the point last year on my own journey, and I'm happy to admit it, that I felt that I moved out of feeling ashamed of it. So for a long time, earlier on in my journey, I relied on marijuana to help me. And when I got to the point in my journey when I stopped taking prescription medications, I started, I didn't realize until later on, upon reflection, that I just started managing and medicating with that instead. I had at the time justified it, and I just want to say I'm a huge advocate of plant medicine, so I'm certainly not saying that it can't be helpful in certain ways for a certain period of time to help you manage something or a situation while you move yourself out of it. But for me personally, I used it to numb myself. And I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression. I was feeling a lot of shame for the fact that, and this goes back to my stories, right? My identity was that I wasn't enough and that I should be further than I'd been. I was working through a doctoral program while I was going through the worst health issues of my life. But in my mind, and because I was being raised by a very traditional system did not, that made it very clear to me that my health issues were not welcome. And that if I wanted to get through and get out and achieve my goal to be able to help people, I had to suck it up and keep going. And so my way to suck it up and keep going was to use that. And I did it for way too long, in way too many years. And like we were saying earlier, I said, first you create your habits and then your habits create you. And then it became like my kryptonite. I couldn't stop. It went from being a way to help manage my anxiety to becoming a way that I hid from the world and I numbed myself. And then I became really ashamed of that. And so once I stopped for years, I didn't talk about it ever. I actually had sworn that I would never tell anybody. And I'd sworn that I would never share this part of my story because I thought, well, what will people think of me? They'll just think, oh my gosh, well, who would want to work with her? Oh my gosh, she doesn't. But what I realized is that it actually made me deeply understand a whole other type of person. So I deeply understand what it feels like to get stuck in a habit that you used at one time because you thought it was good for you. And then it actually becomes the reason that you're standing in your own way. And I had to change my identity so that I could become a person who didn't have that habit anymore. And I haven't had that habit for years, but I honestly didn't think I'd ever share this. So I'm grateful you asked the question because that's a part of our healing journey, right? Is being okay with sharing the darkest parts of the journey. And for me, that was one of the darkest parts of mine.
Well, I'm so grateful you were brave enough to share with us.
I'm grateful you asked the question because I would have never thought that would come out of my mouth today, and I never thought I'd share that story.
Sweating later.
But it's important to share because maybe there's somebody out there listening who will hear this story and realize that, oh my gosh, like that's my thing. I'm doing the same thing and I don't want to do that anymore, or it might not be, it might not be medical marijuana, it might be something else, but we all have that thing, right? That is that thing that actually in a way helps us stand still and stay in our comfort zone. And for me, that helped me stay in my comfort zone. But you and I both know that the only way it can change is by leaving your comfort zone.
By being very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I've also learned that when we are vulnerable leaders, it has a magnetic attraction like no other. It does the opposite. It actually makes people realize the leader that you are and being brave enough to expose parts of yourself that would be considered shameful or like the dark night of the soul, like depths right? It's like, it's in fact your superpower. So
It's
I
like
think
the truth will set you free, and it
100.
really does. Yeah. So I'm so grateful that you helped me talk about this and find a way to share it because I've never ever done that. I never thought I'd get on a podcast and share the story. But it's meant to be. It's meant
Yeah,
to be.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What makes you rebellious?
Oh, I love that question. I feel like I've been a rebel ever since I went into grad school and they told me I couldn't talk about any of the things I wanted to talk about because, but you know what? I've always considered myself a square peg in a round hole. And I think for me, being the fact that I am a trained epidemiologist who actually believes in the spiritual side of our health and well-being, who actually not just believes it but knows it to be true, that bridges the gap. I used to say, and I haven't said it for a while, but I used to say to my clients, I bridge the gap between science and spirit. And I think that that's what makes me rebellious because I know that there's nobody else who's an epidemiologist who would be willing to even think about talking about this kind of stuff, let alone believing and knowing that has everything to do with our health and ability to heal.
Yeah, like mic drop, best answer ever. That. What does it mean to you to reclaim your wild?
Oh, I love that so much. What it means to me to reclaim your wild is to, I can use myself as an example, and I'm thinking of so many of my clients. I think that as kids, like, think of yourself. I can think of myself. Like, did any of you listening ever have an imaginary friend? Or I was this when I was in kindergarten, this is not a joke, I was put in timeout for being too happy. Because that is not a joke. That is a real story. My teacher told my parents that my happiness was a distraction and actually asked my mom to come in for a conference and asked her, wasn't there something she could do about it? And thank goodness I have parents who always encouraged me and still to this day to be myself. But I feel like, we have all these things about our imagination when we're a kid, and that as we grow up and we go through life, we're trained to turn all that stuff off. We're trained to stop believing that it's real. But the thing is that I've learned, and I think it took me, and I'm grateful I had my near-death experience because it was through that I learned that that stuff is all real. And I think that reclaiming your inner wild is reconnecting with that stuff, reconnecting with your intuition, with all the things that made you believe that there were unicorns and fairies and all that stuff when we were kids. You know what? There freaking are unicorns and fairies, by the way. And, we have there's so much power in that, in our intuition, in our imagination. And there's so much there for us to explore in the ways of how can we connect not just with ourselves, but with the outside non-physical world, that energetic world that exists that we can't see with our 3D eyes. So we train ourselves as grown-ups to believe none of it can be real. But I think reclaiming your inner wild has everything to do with bringing that stuff back. And so that's been part of my journey these past 2 years is I promised myself that I am going to be that joyful girl no matter what. Like I hope everyone puts me in timeout for being too happy. I hope that my happiness is too much for some people. It should be, we should all be too much because you know what, that's going to, like you said, it's magnetic because then the friends, the people, the experiences, the opportunities that are really meant for us, that's going to freaking draw them right to us. Like I've no doubt that you and I just did not meet by accident today. There is no such thing as a coincidence. So that's what I think reclaiming your inner wild is.
Yeah, I think that's so cool because you're right. I asked at the beginning, like, how did we even find
I know, like, how did we do this?
It's no accident. No accident. I love that answer so much because I think we need feminine leadership that is so audacious to dream in unicorns and fairies. And why is that
Hell
important?
yeah.
Because when at our very high level of our group coaching, group community program, when I tell them to dream again, they're like, but is this dream too big? So if we
Right?
go to the unicorn fairy quantum realm, then anything becomes possible. And I think that's why what you're saying is so profoundly important. And I just want to emphasize that is like, we need to come back to her.
Yeah, we
And
do.
I was in a group therapy thing with my husband at one point, and one girl got really mad at me because she said I was too happy. So I've been there.
I love, oh, there are so many reasons we were meant for each other. This just makes my day so much.
I started crying instantly, and he was like, "Why are you so upset?" I'm like, "I don't know, but that's I feel so called out. Like I wasn't even trying to." Anyways, it was just made me laugh. There's lots of alignment there. I have some rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
What books are currently on your nightstand?
Oh, what's on my nightstand right now is The Practice by Seth Godin.
Oh, I love him. One thing that brings you joy.
One thing that brings me joy, my cat Peanuts. I love that. I totally am a cat girl. Who do I admire most? Oh, I'm going to share who comes to mind, and that's my mom. And just real quick, talk about amazing. At the age of 57, she had 6, not just one, but 6 massive strokes. And now doctors would consider her a miracle. When they wanted to send her to the nursing home to stare at the wall, she looked at me and she said, "That's not my destiny." And the reason she's a miracle is because of everything you and I have talked about today, because she took her power back. She took it into her own hands, and she decided, they told her she would never walk again, and she dared them to tell her that again. And do you know what she does today? She walks, and you would never know. She does everything that they told her she would never reclaim. Everything they told her wasn't possible. She defied the odds. And I admire that because I watched my mom give everything of herself to everyone and put herself last for all those years, which I believe to this day is why she had those strokes at such a young age. But to watch her overcome, and now, she's in her mid-60s. It's over 5 years later. And every time she sees her specialist, they're like, "You're some kind of miracle." And she's really not. She just decided that she didn't have to listen, and that didn't have to be her destiny. And any single one of us could be that powerful too.
Yeah, they give me full body goosebumps, and it makes me think of the quote, like in A Return to Love or Course in Miracles, like the real miracle is the shift in perception. And how badass is that to just say, "No, that's not my destiny."
Yep.
How many times do people say that without actually understanding what they're even saying? And how, anyways,
right, the power of our words, like that's a whole other topic we could nerd out about.
Come back.
I was gonna say we have to talk about that too, actually. It's just the power of our words. Our cells are listening. So rather than allowing her cells to align with the vibration of "you're never going to be able to do this again," she started telling herself, and she was convinced that she would be able to rebuild her own neural pathways. And she started telling herself, I can, and I will. And it took a long time, but she fought and she did it. She did it all.
Fill in the blank. Community is?
Community is connection.
Advice you wish someone gave you 5 years ago.
Advice I wish someone gave me 5 years ago. Be yourself and just say the thing.
Yeah. Oh God, we really are. Best word to describe you.
I feel like I'm just all about love. That's all I'm all about.
I felt that from the first 5 minutes of us chatting. So accurate.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Well, thank you for, us being to finally make this conversation happen, because we rescheduled a few times, and I just knew it was going to be really good. So I'm super grateful that you are here. And
me too.
I am grateful with your honesty and, your bravery to step into the unknown, because I'm sure in your world that was not an easy decision. And I'm sure you faced a lot of criticism and possible rejection for doing such an audacious thing. But the world is a better place for leaders like you. And I said it earlier, but now I totally get it. Just never stop dreaming. And being that light for the people that you serve, because it's so needed in the world, especially today. So for anyone listening who is super aligned to your message and wants to dive more deeply into your work and your world, how can they find you?
Best way to find me is go to drelizabethrodgers.com and you can find me there. I just feel intuitively called to share this. If any of you would like to reach out to me directly, Dr. Rodgers at drelizabethrodgers.com is my email, and I would be honored to connect with you that way too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's funny, before we talked today, I just had this super strong intuitive feeling, and I thought, I feel like today is the day we were meant to have this connection, and we absolutely were.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. We would also love it if you shared this episode with your friends. We want every woman who wants to learn more to be able to access this awesome information. Help us spread the message like wildfire.
The Rebel Talk podcast is brought to you by the Poppy Clinic. To learn more, check us out at poppyclinic.com.